I'm Matt and welcome to Tech Tested. Are you sick of your stock CPU cooler not keeping up with your thermal needs? Are you not wanting to deal with one of them fancy aftermarket CPU coolers? Well, we may just have a solution for you on this latest installment of Redneck Tech. But before we get started, some good news. We have finally upgraded to 4K. So if you have a 4K monitor, you can take advantage of that because that's what we'll be uploading at. So what we have before us is an AMD FX 8320 attempting to be cooled by the stock CPU cooler. Now, as far as stock CPU coolers go, this AMD one really isn't that bad. It's way better than what Intel offers. But it has a really hard time keeping up with these CPU coolers. And we thought, hey, is there gonna be a good way to increase the performance of a stock CPU cooler? Now, obviously, one solution could be go out and buy an aftermarket CPU cooler like a Hyper 212 Evo from Cooler Master, which is usually a really good option. But one thing those tower coolers do a really bad job of is actually cooling the VRM around the CPU. And that's actually why stock CPU cooler designs have them blowing down towards the motherboard so that the extra airflow can cool down the VRMs. If you look here, you can see we are clearly running at a very toasty 58 degrees. Now, if you're only familiar with modern CPUs, that may not seem that hot, but these FX processors can only run up to 60 degrees Celsius. So we here at Tech Tested sometimes like to do some pretty redneck stuff, and we've got a pretty awesome solution for you today. What we're gonna be doing is, we've got a leaf blower. That's right, we're gonna be cooling our CPU with a leaf blower. So, right now, we've been running this test for about 40 minutes. It didn't take that long to get to 58 degrees. It takes about 20 minutes to get that hot, but that's our benchmark that we're gonna go by, and we're gonna try to get better thermals using a leaf blower on our CPU cooler, so we're gonna get to installing this now. All right, so what we need to do is we need to shut down the computer and give this little CPU a rest, and then we're gonna take the actual stock fan off. We're gonna be leaving the stock CPU cooler though. You'll get to see what kind of redneck stuff we're doing to this computer. All right, something a lot of people don't know about these AMD CPU coolers, these older ones, is they actually have little tabs on the fans that you can just pop off, which is actually the first step for us removing this CPU fan. We actually wanna keep the rest of the bracket. So we're just going to take a screwdriver and slowly pop it out. And just like that, our CPU fan is removed. Now we're actually gonna leave it plugged in. Actually, you know what? We're gonna rip it out. We're gonna plug this case fan in where the CPU fan goes, so the motherboard thinks that it has a CPU fan, even though our CPU fan is going to be running at 112 volts out of a leaf blower and not out of whatever this runs at out of a case fan. So next step is we're gonna have to take our leaf blower, which this is a leaf blower I got off of Amazon. I think it was like $35, and it's electric, which is good. Not that I recommend doing this at all, but I highly don't recommend doing this if you have a gas leaf blower, because that'll just make you sick. So it's actually going to go on right like this, and it's almost like it was made for it, because look, it sets right there on the case, it sets right there on the CPU cooler. Actually, I've got it plugged in. What's this say? Hey, it says use the correct extension cord. I just bought this extension cord. I have no idea if it's the correct extension cord. So we're just gonna wing it. Now I have to grab my duct tape, and I have to remember where I put that. Fresh pack of duct tape. If you can't fix it with duct tape, it can't be fixed, can it? All right. So, this is almost as refreshing as like peeling the plastic off of a new computer case or some glass side panel. So the big question is, what's the best way to do this? I think first thing we need to do is secure it to the chassis a little bit, and then we are going to attempt to secure it to the CPU cooler itself. Oh yeah, that's not going anywhere. All right, as you can see, our gorgeous new CPU fan is installed. So we're gonna go ahead and set this sucker up and hope things don't fall catastrophically. Clearly, this is how this thing was intended to be used. We're gonna try to turn this thing on with no CPU fan, but chances are it's going to overheat quite quickly. And I'm not even gonna put this thing into Prime 95, which is the program we're using to stress this, until we get the fan running, because it is definitely going to overheat immediately if we do that. There is no fan on the CPU right now. That's where this will come in handy in a moment. Let's hope it even boots, actually. We are at 41 degrees Celsius without running the fan at all, which is abysmal. It's actually, we're up to 45. That's way too high. What we're going to do, it's running at 45 degrees Celsius. Before we start Prime 95, we are going to turn on our CPU fan and see how this goes. I'm a little worried it's gonna knock over the case. It's quite loud. All right, here we are. Let's plug it in. It actually has 2 speeds. We could run it at low speed and high speed and see if there's a difference. You could save yourself some acoustics. We'll see. That's low speed. Gotta run. Prime 95. This is gonna take a little while. Our temperatures seem to be holding right around 54 degrees. It hasn't been running that long, but that's already a 4-degree improvement if it can hold. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be moving at all. So obviously this is already a significant upgrade from what we were dealing with before. Minor noise level difference, just a little bit. So that might be something you want to get used to, but I don't know, I don't think it's that bad, right, Josh? You probably can't hear me, but Josh is gonna put subtitles down. It's holding steady at 54 degrees Celsius, but we're gonna see what happens when we ramp up the fan speed. Okay, we've ramped up the fan speed and we're gonna let it run for a little while to see if it improves our temperatures at all. We'll be right back. So we turned the computer off for a couple of reasons. First, this thing's kinda loud, just a little bit. And also, our CPU is getting quite hot. So on the low setting on our blower, we saw an improvement of 4 degrees Celsius. We went from running at 58 degrees Celsius on the stock cooler down to a icy, chilly 54 degrees Celsius with our blower on the low setting. Now, on the high setting, it actually increased our temperatures up to about 59 degrees Celsius, and it was still rising, so that's why we decided to shut it off and give our CPU a little bit of a break. We were running, by the way, Prime 95 in order to stress the CPU. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that program, but if you want to stress an overclock or your CPU to check out temperatures or overclock stability, that's what you use. Now, what I think is happening here, and the reason we aren't getting better temperatures, is a couple things. At low speeds, it did improve our temperatures a little bit, but we kind of reached the maximum capacity of what this particular cooler is capable of cooling at. Once we increased our fan speed, what I'm assuming happened is our air was moving too fast and wasn't actually able to take the heat away from the CPU cooler, meaning that the CPU cooler itself was soaking. So if you're gonna do this, which is obviously a fantastic improvement over the stock cooler, you should leave it on the low setting. If you want to get this leaf blower, we will definitely link it down in the description, and improve your CPU temps on your stock AMD CPU cooler. This is obviously a very viable solution. It might affect your system noise just a little bit, but hey, if you're already running a blower style GPU, it's not going to sound that different, is it? So what's the takeaway? Redneck engineering sometimes works. Maybe not as well as some of us would like, but it works. Thanks for watching. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on all of our social media platforms so you can keep up with what we're doing right now. Check out our store so you can pick up some merch, and check out our Discord so you can discuss computers and anything else that you want to talk about.